Or are you okay with just when speaking?
I'm going to keep mine on, but it doesn't mean other people have to do what I do.
Okay, okay.
So
I'll just
whatever
take
you're
it off when
comfortable
I'm
with.
talking if that's
Yeah, I
okay,
don't know.
because otherwise. I have- I also spilled water all over this mask.
Okay.
What are the questions typically like?
I've only done one of these and it was during the pandemic, so I don't know how similar this is going to be to that. I'm trying to think about, it was online and people posted questions basically that we could then answer. I don't know. How do you know which journal to submit to? How do you pick your reviewers?
Okay,
Kind of basic stuff.
okay, okay.
Yes.
So I guess we all have this new template now.
That's what I understand.
Yeah, I didn't, I wasn't bothered.
Yeah.
It's like, it looks to me like the lay summary is like a bigger font than the abstract, and then the badges, like they're just so much, you know, real estate,
Yeah.
like above the fold,
Yeah.
kind of. So, but I guess I was asking Brian about it, and it sounds like it's kind of like that deal. Yeah, I wasn't wild about it.
I've been trying to get authors to follow the newest version of APA style. So nagging, you know.
Yeah.
If you don't do it now, you're going to have to make the changes after, you know, it gets into production. That's just going to slow things down. And now the headings, like, I don't know exactly what will happen in terms of like the headings in that format are not APA style. So
Okay.
then it's like, why am I nagging people to do?
Yeah, I mean, that might be worth bringing up, because that has been also a challenge with us. It's just, yeah, and with me and you know, the students, we're just like trying to figure out what's the heading, and I mean, the citation stuff is easy, but the rest of it is. Do you use like the virtual assistant at like
No.
No?
Tell me about more.
Yeah, I mean, when they started, I had thought that I would have to have my editorial assistants doing the, you know, like the kind of button pushing.
Yeah.
They being do all it, like essentially we meet and I have a list of decisions, and then we just send it to them, and then they are the ones who are sending out the, you know, like the letters to the emails to authors, like the template, and then we, you know, say there's the summary. So it's kind of.
And that happens throughout the whole process or at the decision stage, or when does it happen?
Like, so they don't do anything with reviewers, like vetting reviewers or anything, but they kind of manage, they do the initial like anonymization check and all of that.
Yeah.
They will send out the emails to to authors. And I guess just kind of, it's like a general mailbox where, like I said, if there's extension. Hi, I'm Nicole.
Hi, I'm Melissa.
It's so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I'm the new kid.
Steve?
Yes,
Hi, it's nice to meet
nice to meet you.
I'm the new kid on the block, I guess.
you. Well, I'm just a little newer than you.
Yeah, okay,
so You're not alone.
okay. Good. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yes.
I mean, I had kind of, told myself it'll be a lot. But now, it is in fact
How are you,
more, JCMC.
Hello.
And you're the, okay, and I guess I was so curious because I had heard, like with the ed board, I heard you had made some changes and I would love to, do you want me to scoot over? Or, I would love to, just talk to you about managing those expectations and just how you.
Masker verloor.
Hi, man.
You know, like,
You didn't clasp me.
Ek nou eers ek journal, ek het net weer toe gehad, so
because we do have.
Julle juist baie oulik het Jessica moet sê.
jy sien dit ons gekyker hoor, ons het ons so
Ja,
ons
ja.
het embarrassed. Kyk die mense het RSVP het net 10 opgedaag en 'n flippin solemn sushi. Dis
Here.
hierdie Franse is niks.
Nee, hulle is niks.
Try to make
expectations clear.
Yeah.
Ek kan nie eens hard doen.
Okay.
Het is jammer, ons het die kappie weer vir jou.
Ja.
Okay.
Ek nie gaan op omgee met al die gewig.
Okay, some of that seems to be a little bit like with the
Really?
tourists, right?
Maar man, hoe jy jou taal gebruik het.
Ja, definitief. Maar dit is nou al die laaste maand. Ek tel wat vinnig
Yeah,
wat
I
in die laaste maand wat ek nou heeltemal buite aksie was, het ek nou niks gedoen eintlik.
I'm sure we're all kind
Maar
of.
ek
Hoeveel het jy opgetel?
ag seker 2 kg dink ek. Ja,
Dit is nie so erg.
Ja. Maar ek sal dit as ek net gaan weer goed.
Yeah.
Ek het nou sommer hier in gym al.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, if you, I would be happy to just have kind of,
Ja.
what
do you got for
progression?
Dis net daar by die gym.
Yeah, just also for norming, you know, like I don't wanna say,
Ek
extension.
was altyd aktief met iets. So dit was net nou
I'm not
jy
gonna, like if someone
jy
says.
is heeltemal eintlik met afspraak
Yeah,
aksie. Ek het gegaan
but
met die
then
gym
it's
as ek
like they're
nou
asking
kyk daar sitting aan dit. Ek moet net goed op my
Oh,
arm kom.
Ag,
Maar
yes.
nee, dit is ek fyn. Ek gaan nou lekker fiets as ek terugkom. Ek het laas naweek dit die eerste keer gedoen en by so regtig nou gemountainbike sommer die ou wat weet wat dit doen. Dis super scary. Is like
Ja, maar moet jy sê die spoed van 'n
spring oor goed en
O, ja,
maar dit is mos
ja,
exciting.
o,
It's
ja,
like
ja, maar ek is bang vir spoed. Ja.
nee, ek is ook maar in 'n styl. Ek wil as jy teen die hele berg by seker opgaan en dan as jy gedaan as jy daar kom maar dan move jy daar af jy weet dan moet jy oplet in die klas.
Ja,
So,
ek sal eerder die opdraandes vat.
maar dis lekker.
Baie mense is so gelukkig soms mense.
Wat gaan jy sê? Ek het nou
Ag, ek weet nie moet ons iets gesê het, moet ons iets voorgeberei.
ja, ek kan net sê oor die journal is ek kan nou maar ek het nou net so veel op die stats van die
Ja, ek het hom in my annual report hier opgeroep. Ja.
ja, okay.
I'm Betsy.
Dan- dan-
Pleased to meet you. Hey, and we never talked.
No,
You're
we haven't.
so nice to email me and say yes to, and we never got to
That's
talk.
okay, but we're busy. That's all right.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, how are things going?
Right, good. How's tempo? Oh, I am.
So we're just gonna take like 5 minutes. We can summarize.
Oh, good.
We will do that, and then it's largely just a question and answer session. Okay.
And we're keeping this on.
However you would like.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on a hot mic. We should not
Yes,
gossip.
hulle het alles gehoor wat ons gesê het.
Gelukkig in Afrikaans. Enige Afrikaans spreek en is wat hier geluister het sal ek baie trots wees. Ja. Oor 'n complain en my gewig.
I'll let you talk about replication. So about that, okay.
Nicole, you're
En dan
even
gaan
I
julle terug
co-edit
weet jy?
HDR.
Môre
I
nag.
was just thinking.
En
Ja,
dan gaan ons na
ja.
Suid-Afrika.
And
Was it?
we,
Maar was jy op dieselfde vlug nie? Wat so
somewhat
is
similar
dit
to
by
what you just heard.
Air France,
Frans,
ja.
Johannesburg toe?
Tell people
Ja,
that
dieselfde vlug.
Nie so
if you're gonna be on the
elf.
editorial
Ja, ja, ja,
board,
ze
I
zijn-
think
Ja,
we
ons moet
would
sommer saam
like
lughawe toe
Ja,
dan.
why not?
Ja.
Ja, dis iets
Hoe laat wil jy vertrek?
And then
Ek het gehoop om nie, ek dink ek kan closing
we
plenary
took people off
van
that next
Ja,
day.
ek dink ook so.
We didn't do it to form a
Dit
editors.
ja, dit is definitief dieselfde vlug.
Ja.
Dus,
But, and if there's somebody that's.
Kijk,
that
en
you
jy-
can see,
ja,
yeah, we can.
Hoor
work
so
in
en
that.
die ander
Is
ding
us,
is,
it, you know, is it
kan
we
jy
need
in
to
die
reach out to
lounge?
them more,
ja.
but we.
Van daai lounge is niks te
Op die lounge key.
We
Ek
thank
word
them,
in lounge.
you know, but there was, I talked to people who said,
Nee,
I noticed that.
nee.
And the first thing I did
dat
was say, did I do a review in the past?
Ek het so
Ja.
Am I on the list of people who are still on the board?
meeste
So it did wake
Eerste
people up a
plek.
little bit.
It's
that-
a little tricky.
ek moet altyd kyk of-
Van daai is next level. Jy kan aandete daar eet en heerlik
Yeah,
uit.
You know,
Ja,
like
dis
this
wel
last.
Jy kan selfs
Yeah.
stort as jy
It's
wil.
not, it's, I don't know what your SME is.
Ja, dit
It's not like 90%.
soms
Ja,
Hulle
ja.
weet
Most
wel.
of the time when they're asked on the.
Ja, gaan
Ons het gedink om selfs, jy weet, laatmiddag te gaan.
En dan daar rond.
En dan daar rondom.
5 or
Want
6 times. and it's-
as jy eers uitgecheck is uit die hotel, dan is dit nou.
Ek het nou toevallig wat ek so later dag gebly het World of Journalism en nou moet ek teruggaan om visum Amerikaanse visum te kry. So ons moes nie eers sê nee,
Ja, jy kan nou
ja, ons gaan nou net daai week.
Freedom.
Ja, dus ek het ook as so baie geld en effort en moeite in hierdie ding en so ek hoop nou maar net dit werk. Maar nou
Ja.
dit is die volgende so ek langs toe om te sê ek sou eintlik nog aand gebly het. So ek is nou in die hotel vir nog ek kan nou maar heel middag gebly so.
Wow.
Maar ek sal ook eerder al wil gaan.
Ja,
As ons
uit-
tens te raak is.
Ja.
Kyk. Maar anyway,
Weet jy daai lang-
And what your lunch would have been, or?
that's my life.
Ja, hulle het hom vir my via e-mail gestuur.
Wat so vorm is.
Added a lot of people to-
As dit
Like,
oor declaration
yeah,
aan te kom.
qualitative methods experience.
Yeah.
Het jy al het jy aangecheck?
Probably 15 or 20 people larger than it was when we started.
When did you?
Ek is sommer
Ja, nee, so-
Started 6 months before I did, but 2020, somewhere in 2020.
Okay, okay, so you're.
At least go ahead, start us, all right? So we're still working on the camera issue here to try to be able to get all the editors for the virtual part, for the hybrid part. My name's Lance Holbert. I'm the editor-in-chief of Journal of Communication. I'm stepping in to oversee the session. Robin Nabby, who is the chair of the Publications Committee for ICA, is unable to attend this year. And so I'm rolling out of my duty as editor-in-chief of JOC. And so I decided to be able to oversee this a little bit. So what we're going to do, the way this typically works, is that all of the editors they'll introduce themselves, spend about 5 minutes or so talking about their journals, what they're overseeing in terms of what initiatives they're looking at, what types of works they're looking for, any other kind of broad overview of what the journal is in terms of its brand. And then by and large, the session is going to be devoted to your questions. And so any questions that you have for anybody or everybody, please just go up to one of the microphones once everybody has run the course here of the editors and outlining the journals, and then we'll begin to address your questions as best we can, and then we'll take whatever questions pop up through the hybrid session as well. Does that work? All right. Why don't we start on the left? How about Melissa? Would you like to start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Melissa Click, and I'm the editor of Communication, Culture, and Critique, which is ICA's journal that's devoted entirely to scholarship that takes a critical approach. So we're looking for pieces that focus on power, inequality, and justice. And really, those are the main anchors that we're looking for. So folks might, focus on a whole bunch of things, from politics or identities, media, rhetoric. It doesn't really matter, aside from it needs to have critical theory at its core. In my 2 years as editor, we've done a lot of revision of the materials for the journal online. So I really invite you, if you're interested in publishing in the journal, to check out our website, especially the instructions for authors. We've tried to make the process of reviewing more transparent at CCC. I figure if it's a critical journal, we probably ought to be incorporating critical scholarship into the way we run the journal. So you'll find that we've sort of clarified and tried to make more transparent the kinds of scholarship that we're looking for. And we've included the criteria that we ask reviewers to use when they evaluate submissions, so that you can see before you submit how they'll evaluate what you do. We have created a new initiative that we are talking about in business meetings at the conference, and you'll find this information on our website as well. I made little bookmarks, so if you want one, feel free to come up and get one after the session. But essentially, it's called a pre-submission review program. ICA, as long as I've been a member, which has been long enough, no need to share just how long, but has struggled to be truly an international organization. And so I've been finding as editor that I do a lot of desk rejecting that I don't enjoy, because submissions may be on par for our topic, but don't meet the format or expectation of the journal. And so we've developed this program for emerging scholars and for international and otherwise marginalized scholars to submit the manuscript before it would go out to review. So you submit through email. There's some, things we ask you to tell us about yourself and the submission. And then we pair your piece with a member of our editorial board whose keywords match your piece's keywords. And they give you a first round of review before you actually submit for review. So if you are a scholar who meets the loose criteria I've just outlined, I strongly encourage you to look at the instructions for authors and look for the pre-submission review program. So much of our field and academia in general is based on exclusion, and we don't want to be a place that's purely based on exclusion. We want to provide mentorship, and we want our space to feel inclusive. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. And it's always terrible to go first, because who knows what the editors will say that I forgot to mention, but I'll pass it over to my colleagues.
All right, I'm Steve Wilson from the University of South Florida, and I have the honor, along with Yuri Safidi from the University of Haifa, of co-editing human communication research. I'm going to read just a couple of sentences from the description of the journal that's on the OUP website, and then just elaborate a bit on them. So on the website, it says, HCR concentrates on presenting the best empirical work in the area of human communication. The journal works to advance understanding of human symbolic processes with a strong emphasis on theory-driven research, the development of new theoretical models, and the development of innovative methods for observing communication. The journal has a broad social science focus. So let me unpack how I interpret, or how we interpret some of that. So empirical, most of the pieces that are published in HCR are data-based of some kind. It's traditionally been a quantitative journal. It's traditionally published a lot of survey and experimental work, and we still publish a fair amount of that. We're getting more submissions with computational methods. We're getting some qualitative submissions, and we've tried to signal that we're open to that with if you look at the editor statement that you and I did, by adding some of that expertise to the editorial board and to one of the associate editors that we are in discussion with right now will bring even more of that. So we're getting some pieces that use interviews, focus groups, field work, et cetera. So we're trying to read empirical broadly. Theory-driven research, I would say the most common comment that we get from HCR reviewers is does this extend theory in the way that you would expect an HCR manuscript to do it? Does it not just apply theory, but does it push advance theory in some way? If it's a post-positivist piece, I often will refer authors to a paper that Lance and DeAndre did on kind of different ways of articulating theoretical contribution, and say, I think some of this might help you make the arguments you want to make back to the reviewers about how your work actually does that. If it's a more interpretive piece, which we don't get a ton of, but if it was a non-post-positivist piece, then it might look a little different in what theoretical contribution was. But I would say that's the most common reviewer response, is how is this advancing theory? Innovative methods is something we're interested in. We get a lot of manuscripts that are focused on interpersonal, intergroup, health communication, political communication. We get a lot of comm technology, et cetera. And sometimes we have discussions amongst ourselves when we get submissions. If we get a paper that maybe presents a theoretical model and there isn't data also in the paper, we may have a discussion about that. Would this be a better fit for communication theory than it would for us? If we get a paper that's a lit review and critical lit review and research agenda, I'm typically going to say you should probably think about annals. I think it's a better fit for this piece. So there's times where we are looking at manuscripts and going, I think some of the other journals might be a better fit for this, but we're also trying to not turn work away, as you were talking about not just trying to be open to a broad range of work that fits within the kind of HCR mandate. One of the initiatives that we've done is a thing called replication notes, and Yuriv has really been the driver of that, so I'm going to let him talk more about that.
So the credit actually belongs to Jonathan, who is watching us from home. The idea, given the discussion about replication and its importance in the social sciences, is to invite authors to submit short manuscripts, like 6 pages or so, and of course the supplemental material is not limited, in which they present replication studies, and in these we expect the original study to present an important finding, and in these manuscripts the theoretical advancement is not expected, although some replications we have already published do present themselves as replication and extension, because time has passed since the original study. It's an ongoing conversation with our reviewers and among ourselves, what would be considered a good replication studies. The original manuscripts, we've seen them, we've reviewed them, we've published them, but this is something slightly new. We are open to what is called direct, exact replications, but also conceptual replications of experimental studies, but also replications of findings using correlational or other techniques. And it's a pleasure to see them out and to see this slowly advancing. And of course, the result of the replication could be either success or failure. It's all about the process. And one important additional comment on that is that the aim is, of course, in no way to threaten or derogate or whatever the original studies, but just to add evidence so that in the end we'll have a good picture of how findings work in different contexts using different stimuli and in different time periods. And that is it. I think we're done, are we?
Great. Hi, I'm Nicole Ellison. I'm in the School of Information at the University of Michigan. I started as editor of JCMC in August, along with my associate editors. So JCMC, we're focused on social science scholarship on technology-mediated interaction. So pieces that are using the online venue as a way of just collecting data or merely kind of describing what's happening online aren't necessarily a good fit. We're really looking for technology-related theorizing. That said, we're not focused only on communication theories. There's a very kind of wide range of disciplinary and methodological traditions that we would love to see papers use. We also, I myself have talked about wanting to cultivate more big idea scholarship. So these would be kind of higher risk, higher reward papers, in addition to the kind of less risky, but still critically important work that furthers technology relevant theory. Since August, we've made a few changes. So one is that we've removed the 30-page limit that JCMC has traditionally had. So there still is a 10,000 word limit, although if it doesn't work for sometimes of qualitative work, for instance, or multi-study papers, you can email me and that's fine, but we've done away with the 30-page limit. We're also really trying to, as much as we can with the pandemic constraints on reviewers, work towards quicker turnaround times. So the official stats from desk rejects from 2021, which was Rich Ling, and then my editorship starting in August was 6 days. Sometimes it's more like 2 to 3. We've also moved to continuous publication. So this means there's no longer the kind of online first purgatory for papers. They just, once they're ready, they are given a stable DOI and published, and with an article and issue number. We've solicited and improved 2 special issues, one on censors and future of work. If there are other ideas out there for special issues, please come talk to me. And we've also done some outreach, a podcast, the discussion section that Nosh has been really working towards, and then also starting a Twitter and Facebook account. I have some other pieces, but I can keep those comments for later. Thanks.
My name is Betsy Graber. I'm the editor of Communication Theory. And if I think back, I think since 2019, that's when I started, and I will wrap up in about a year or so. There's always that transitional period, of course. Communication theory is, I don't want to say odd, in terms of its mission and what it's eager to receive, but I'll try and define what we're looking for. If I have to use a few summary words, it would be we want to see original theory development. We want to see synthesis, but not summary state-of-the-art literature reviews. It has to take bodies of literature and bring them together and show a new path where we ought to go next. So in that sense, communication theory, you could literally think of it as a place where you'll go to find some impetus for your own work. I mean, where should we move towards? Those are the kinds of articles we'd like to see. We have no area focus whatsoever. If you look at the editorial board, you'll see that there's literally people from every single division and interest group on the editorial board. We also don't have a particular method or approach that we fancy at all. As a matter of fact, we're actually a little anti-method. So you do not want to send us a paper that's formulated in or laid out in the traditional format of a literature review or method section, results and discussion. We don't publish that. There are many other journals doing a fine job of that. Right. We want to see those papers who are written in that formula taken together as bodies of literature and some synthesis of that. We also don't want to see a textual analysis on one specific case study. We want synthesis, large bodies of literature coming together. We do publish major meta-analyses if they provide, again, shine the light on where to go next. We also publish, we haven't done many of them, but some computational methodology papers that suggest how we can move forward in a computational direction. One thing that we've started, and by the way, Herman right next to me here is an associate editor of communication theory as well as an editor of Annals. But what we've done that was new is we started the virtual issue series, which Journal of Communication is doing incredibly well. And so I want to, at this point, already invite anybody here and to ask you to spread the word. We would love to see proposals for a virtual issue. What that means is you decide on some area of interest and you collect 4 to 5 communication theory papers, write a summary of each of those and a nice introduction, perhaps a conclusion. And so you basically curate a virtual issue that goes online on our website. And it becomes open access for a number of years. And so you make those articles available to basically everybody. So we've had a number of those, and I would love to have more of that. So I strongly, encourage you to let us know. Just email me and propose something, and we'll take it from there. I love articles that provoke, perhaps even start the debate. And we also, of course, publish papers who come in and they are slowly polished by reviewers, going through and through until it shines. We do both kinds of articles. I personally have a kind of a soft spot for a paper that might be a bit rough, but might really provoke thought. I'll just go on record for saying that I have a soft spot for that. That's about it.
Thanks. My name is Herman Wasserman. I'm from the University of Cape Town in South Africa. I've taken over as editor of the Annals of the International Communication Association about a year and a half ago or so. I'll summarize the aims and the scope as we have them on the website, and then maybe say a little bit about where we also think about going. We just had an editorial board meeting just before this one, so some nice new ideas that have been generated. So the Annals is a journal that publishes state of the discipline, literature reviews, and essays. So these are typically longer pieces. We don't have an upper word limit, so we've had really long essays. So the sky is the limit in a way. The idea is really to interrogate, summarize, critically analyze the state of the field, the state of the subdiscipline that you might be an expert in, theoretical essays. So typically the types of submissions that we get are reviews. So with that we mean reviews that help readers understand the development of current knowledge within the discipline over a defined period in the past, but it also creates a roadmap for further research. So typically a programmatic type of article that says this is state of the art, this is state of the discipline, and this is where we need to go. Communication Insights is similar, but this also shows a specific topic, a specific area of research, a specific topic of focus has developed over the years, maybe how knowledge is accumulated around a specific topic or a specific point of focus, and again, where that topic might go in future years. And then also book reviews, and we haven't had one of them recently, actually, book review essays. So this is something also to consider. What we would like to do is maybe group a number of books together, recent books on a specific field, a specific topic, specific idea. Again, not a sort of review that says this is a good book or that's a bad book or this author is a terrible writer or whatever, but a sort of book that says this is where we stand in the field. This is sort of a meta-analysis of the field, and these books are exemplars of specific schools of thought, etc. So critical book reviews is something that we would welcome. So it's an international, interdisciplinary in its scope, but we particularly welcome contributions from the Global South. We had a special issue that I edited a few years ago when I was still associate editor of the journal, that we just invited authors from the Global South to write back to theory and concepts and literature as they have developed in the North. So what does it look like? What does political communication as a field look like when viewed from a vantage point in Latin America, for instance? Or what does feminist scholarship look like if viewed from a perspective, from an African scholarship perspective? So those sort of debates, those sort of issues are we're really interested in. So these are typically longer sets of essays, but what we want to go in future is also to think about shorter pieces. Some of my colleagues here have mentioned some of their ideas. We've been inspired by some of their ideas. We'll probably try and copy them. So imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, as they say. So we'll try and also look at maybe debates in the field, shorter, provocative essays, provocative debates. So if you have a suggestion maybe for a format of if you think there's in your specific area of focus, there's a specific debate developing, there's a specific set of arguments developing, and you would like to have a few authors respond to that, come to us with a suggestion. We're really flexible in terms of what the format could be. And then specifically what we would like to encourage is recently graduated PhD students or postdocs. Typically, when you submit your dissertation, and it's been accepted and you graduate, then you publish the findings from your thesis summary, empirical findings. So, but not often the literature reviews often are not published. And actually, PhD students, postdoctoral students are in a very good position because they've just read all of the literature, they have a good overview of the field, and can rework that literature review into the type of essay, the type of piece that we might be interested in. Provided that is a critical analysis, a critical argument that you build around literature, not just a descriptive overview of the literature. So that is also something to consider, and maybe also encourage your students to consider for submission to the annals. So I'll leave it at that, and I think then we probably have time for questions later on.
And I'll provide a quick summary relative to Journal of Communication. So once again, I'm Lance Holbert from Temple University, and I'm cycling out as the editor at Journal of Communication. So the new editorial team will start here in the next few months. And so just to give you a heads up, the date hasn't been finalized for the transition, but the way this typically works is that we'll come to a date, let's say September 1st. And any works that are submitted up through August, the end of August, will still be overseen by me through their completion with a decision in some way. And on that date of September 1st, let's just say hypothetically, if that is the date, the new editorial team will take over and begin to see works through to completion as well. So no one work will be involved in some shift from one editorial team to another. It is important to note. What I will also stress is that it'll be announced by ICA of when that date of transfer will occur. The new editors will be announced, as well as what will be important for you to look for is their editorial vision statement. So I can outline a little bit of what we've done in the past few years at Journal of Communication, but also know that if you're not submitting, let's say up before the hypothetical September 1st transfer, there's going to be a new vision, a new editorial vision that takes place, and it will be important for you to consume that to get a sense of where the journal is going and what the new group is looking to do. So
in terms of journal communication over the last 3.5, 4 years or so, we've really stressed the idea of looking for contributions that are offering something that's more field general than subfield specific. One of the main challenges that we have is that a lot of really good work comes our way, but we have not adopted a best within subfield approach to our decision making. Instead, we're looking for pieces that are offering some type of contribution, particularly a theoretical contribution, that is going to have impact across a wide range of subfields. And then beyond that, in terms of the works that we receive, journal communication has a history of being more on the quantitative social science side. Very early within our vision statement, we made a decision to want to try to expand that and to push in the direction where at the start, we were probably 90% quantitative social science submissions and 10% in empirical qualitative or critical studies or cultural studies or rhetorical studies. And even with the diversity of we have at the moment, 16 associate editors and 170 people on the editorial board that is representative of a wide range of epistemologies. We've been able to push that to 75% are quantitative social science submissions and 25% fall into the other camps in some way. So there's progress in that direction, but by no means are we at 50-50 at all. Journal of communication. So, in really the dominant decision in terms of, let's say, like a desk reject versus sending out something external, is not usually due to the quality of the work. It's relative to journal communication and what we're branding it and focusing on it as the field general outlet versus the idea of publishing works that are really high quality but nested within a particular subfield, and that's where the contribution is going to be. So we publish, journal communication publishes 6 issues a year. I would say by the end of the day, in any one calendar year, you'll see 40 works appear in Journal of Communication. The number of submissions has steadily increased. I will just say that over time. So, and we are seeing works now from not just communication, but we're seeing works and have published works from folks from economics, mathematics, sociology, political science, computer science, information. It is a wide range that we receive. And by the way, that was my mom texting me, by the way. Still a man-child. And so, asking me how this is going. Let's see. Yeah, I think beyond that, I can speak a little bit more of the experiences of JFC I had, but it's limited in terms of what I can offer you a future, unless you're looking to publish send something out in the next few months. Because once again, you're going to want to look to see what the editorial vision is for the new editorial team, which will be announced here soon enough. All right, thank you. So with that, I can lead. Are there any particular questions? Or let me ask first, is there anything based on what everybody talked about that they want to add? No, we're okay. So we'd like to open it up to your questions then. Relative to, you have all the editors up here, and if there's any questions you'd like to ask of the specific editors or all of us in general, feel free to do so. Right, and why don't you, can you go back to a microphone and ask this, since this is a hybrid session, so everybody could hear.
Hi, editors. Thanks for your fantastic sharings. So I'm currently a PhD student at UC Edinburgh, and my name is Jack. I have a question in terms of when we receive, for example, conflicting comments from multiple reviewers. I'm wondering how editors, or to what extent do you step in and trying to figure out how authors, especially graduate students, should lean towards which side? I'm just a general question for all the editors. Thanks.
Would like to go first.
Forced me to go first again. So I think it's always a challenge to get conflicting reviews. We have 2 reviewers. Is that everyone's practice, 2 reviewers?
Yes,
3. Okay, yeah. It's easier with 2 than with 3, I would guess, but I look forward to hearing what you say. Sometimes I would say every time I've seen that happen, I will try and give the author a little bit of guidance. I've even jumped on a Zoom call with an author who, I'll say, if you want to talk this, especially if I can see that they're a grad student or a young scholar, if you want to talk this over, I can make time to talk it over with you. To me, this is a very, it's a case by case kind of thing. It depends on, maybe I see the merit of one reviewer over another. I try not to intervene in what the reviewers do or say very much, because I feel like it's their primary job to give you feedback. But if I do feel like I can offer a way forward, I personally will try and help, at least open the door for you to contact me if you want to talk it through.
We have 3 reviewers typically for each submissions, and we have an associate editor. It's not at all about the majority vote. It's about the substance of the recommendations and the reviews. And I think the question is, could this comment be addressed within what you would expect from a revision other than a new manuscript? We do our best that if it is addressable, if the main concerns are addressable within the revision, then we give it a chance. But it also depends on how far the associate editor or the editor-in-chief is from the substance area of the manuscript, and how much we can evaluate and answer these questions. In the absence of knowledge of the area and a good understanding of what's going on in the manuscript, I would go with the majority. But that is typically we do have associate editors for that. So it's basically based on, and I've seen manuscript with 2 reject, revision, and it went to a revision just recently. So it's the associate editor basically convinced me that this is doable.
Yeah, so at JCMC, we do have 3 reviewers, and typically it is the role of the associate editor who would give that kind of guidance, and not just in terms of conflicting guidance from reviewers, but also highlighting specific areas to pay attention to. I will say that as an author, you should feel free to kind of highlight any discrepancies in your response, because so that is, just to make that more salient for the reviewers when they do receive the feedback. And yeah, I think at times I would also kind of empower you to think about what you think will make the manuscript better with the advice. And so I don't necessarily think that that the demands of the reviewers are, given from on high, and that they need to be slavishly kind of, ascribed to. That there is some room for authors making and articulating a rationale for a particular path that they think will make the manuscript stronger. And sometimes that's compelling, and sometimes it's not.
A request that we reintroduce ourselves as you're answering, because the
sorry, that was Nicole. Okay, I'm basically the communication theory, and I want to add to what you've said here. I think when there's conflicting advice from reviewers, I think an editor and associate editor find it very interesting to see what you make of it. And we don't expect you're going to make all the changes that are suggested, but we want to see your responses to it. And you can convince us. If you write a compelling response to a piece of advice from a reviewer that you disagree with, we enjoy that. That is what is really interesting to us as well, to see your response if you do not want to make that change. So speak your mind. You know, I mean, we've all been authors. We all write these angry responses to reviewers and then edit it before we send it in. Do that. And then, write a nice no-tone kind of a response and send it in. And we honestly, I can speak probably only for myself, but I really enjoy watching that debate between authors and reviewers. Yeah.
Yeah, Howard Russell and Annals of Communication Association. I mean, I can only agree. Recently, we had a case where reviewers were very critical of the piece, and actually some of them recommended rejection, others said major revisions. And then the author responded and gave a very good argument, a very well-reasoned reading of the reviews, because that's really what this is about. The reviewers read the piece, the submission. The associate editor reads the reviews and gives their reading of the reviews, and then the author again and the editor give their review. So it's basically a dialogue or a discussion around these reviews, and so. And that in that case, we were persuaded to take the author's viewpoint and actually go against some of the advice of the reviewers, because in the author's view, that was a misreading of the manuscript and what he wanted to do. So just to reiterate what's already been said, feel free to respond and to be critical of the reviewers, but in a way that points to maybe where they've missed the point, misinterpreted. So yeah.
And I'll just add, once again, Lance Hobart, Journal of Communication, that, you know, especially for a young scholar, the idea of agency, you know, that, I mean, at the end of the day, when we ask you to write, revise, and resubmit, we're inviting you to do it. It's an invitation that you can accept or reject. You can choose to, like, no, I'm not going to go that road, or I don't want to do this. Or you recognize your agency begins immediately when there's a decision that is made and you're choosing to, you know, to accept that invitation. And yes, we do hope that in the course of the decision letter that it's giving you a clear idea relative to what we are particularly interested in, or what's particular of note of the various reviews and the other things that may be secondary or tertiary. And to be able to, and if that's not clear, then as a few have mentioned up here, the idea of reaching out to the editor is perfectly fine to do so, because it saves everybody a lot of time. Just to work it through, that there's clarity of how this is going to go, I think is exceedingly important. So recognize that you do have that type of agency. Go ahead.
Sorry, I can scoot over.
Okay, no, you're fine.
My name is Olesya Koltsova. I'm from St. Petersburg. I got sort of a bit provocative question to everybody. As a person who does a lot of computational communication research, I have ended up being on a board of a high-ranking journal that is basically run by computer scientists. And I was amazed how different editorial practices there are, especially in terms of speed. Computational scientists review speed. Computer scientists manage to do things so fast. It's really amazing. And I was amazed with the amount of cooperation and collaboration between the editorial board members, how they help to find reviewers fast and things like that. I've been thinking whether this has been ever discussed in your editorial boards. Is there anything we can do to be faster? What is special about computer scientists that makes them able to work the fast that we don't have. Maybe we also have it as social scientists. And sometimes it leads for consequences, this speed leads to consequences that are very sad for me. There are so many excellent journals in communication, but ultimately, when you are pressed with this publish or perish requirement, you end up like making suboptimal choices. For example, just recently, we are having a paper on social capital privacy, and this is actually a paper that really fits the computer-mediated communication journal. But we ended up sending it to a journal that is closer to computer science just because it's faster. And I'm absolutely unhappy about that, absolutely. So this is probably not a question to give a ready response, but rather for a discussion or for thinking about it. Yeah, thank you.
Sure, I can jump in. So I'm in a iSchool, so I have a lot of colleagues and also attend some of the more CS-focused conferences. I mean, I think part of that is where it's really a different model, right? Where you have proceedings that then are the count as the publications, the proceedings that are tied to the timing of the conference. So I think that's part of it. There's also only one round of revision typically, where sometimes we might have two or even three. And I think there's also, I would say, just thinking about those experiences, the ones at least like CHI or CSEW that I've seen, you have a committee with a set of deadlines. And so you have, sometimes hundreds of people all with the same deadline. And I think there really is kind of some normative pressures. And I will say that the downside, I think, of that model is that people are sending work out because it's November 1st and not because they feel the piece is ready. So I agree. I think the speed to publication is something that I think everyone as author and editor and reader would like to see. I know that this is something that we have really focused on in terms of doing our best to get reviews back in 60 days to authors, and we've been able to do that. I will also just and with also desk rejects trying to do that very quickly, because we know how important this is to people's careers. I will say that the last couple of years has really been challenging in terms of reviewing resources. I see some nods, but there really is. It's very difficult to procure reviewers, to get reviewers to agree to sometimes look at the revision once it comes back, and then also just in terms of the timing that there are also many requests for extensions. So I think some of these are across the just academia and the researching community in general, and then maybe some are specific to these different kind of publication models that I think do have benefits, but also challenges that I've seen.
I want to add one statistic related to COVID, in the COVID era of finding reviewers. I just pulled it up here that 60% of invitations that we sent out the last calendar year for reviewers were rejected, so more than half. I think COVID has, I can see it on many levels of the journal's operation, has really slowed things down considerably.
I can add a little something too. So at Journal Communication, we do treat time as a valuable resource in this process. And so with the volume of submissions that we receive, we have a desk reject rate of about 75%, and those decisions are made within 3 days. So 75% of the works that come our way, there's a decision within 3 days that this is going to work or not. We also do emphasize that, and I can see in an initial reading that there are certain pieces that either the author will know in a cover letter, or when I'm reading it, I'm clearly recognizing that time is especially important potentially relative to the findings that are offered, of which I will have a discussion with the author and say, hey, listen, this is our time frame. This is what we're working under. If you want to go quicker,
then I'm going to suggest you to, so it's the piece on misinformation or something like that, then go to the Harvard Misinformation Review. And you can go and you can get it through quick and you'll get a decision much good. They just work at a fundamentally different process than us. And I think that that's perfect. I would let them know that relative to our time frame is what we're sticking to. And this is, we're trying to make that we're trying to be as timely as possible, but to work through what we think we need to work through to make a valid and reliable decision. And that there's simply other outlets that exist. And I look at it just strictly from my outlet, from my outlet, Journal of Communication, of just, it's not like I need more works coming my way at the moment. You know, there's a lot and already. And so with that, it's just, you know, there's certain things we can do, there's certain value we can provide, and there's other journals that exist out there that provide other types of value. And that's just part of the larger competitive marketplace.
I'll just add a couple of other comments. Again, time in the reviewing process. So we also desk reject, not quite that much, but somewhere on the order of 45% of submissions. But if something is done, and again, that happens typically within, I think the average is 8 days, and that takes, for us, sometimes that happens because if we get a paper in an area that is not either of our specialties, but we have an associate editor, then we may consult with them before we figure this out too. We do not send desk rejects that are that long. We always provide a couple of paragraphs of substantive feedback on the paper, an explanation for why perhaps HCR isn't the best outlet, but also some issues to consider when revising the paper for other outlets. So you will get some substantive feedback, even if it's a desk reject, and you will get it within about a week. So I think there's much to be said for that in terms of, you know, you're not just going to get something that just basically says you didn't fit the journal with no explanation of why or where else to go or what to think about. And then the turnaround time is similar to what you talked about in terms of 60 days. That's the average. So it's not, given the constraints that we've all just talked about, it seems pretty reasonable. People are not going to be sitting around 8 months, 10 months going, where's my manuscript, that sort of thing.
We have one question from here. There's two here, but there's one from up here as well. So we'll go with you and then we'll see.
Sure. Hi, my name is Cindy Shen from UC Davis. I've talked to a lot of people who are actually interested in submitting special issue proposals. So I want to get some sense, some guidance from the panel about what is specifically you're looking for in special issue proposals. Specifically, I think we're kind of familiar with topic-based special issues or sometimes theory-based special issues. But what about method-oriented special issues? For example, image as data or video as data as a method, or platform specific or context specific, like TikTok based special issues, or East Asian context based special issues. How welcoming are your journal in terms of, you know, these special issue proposals, and how narrow is too narrow? Thank you.
Just want to point out that Cindy is one of the AEs for JCMC. So if you have any questions, you can go to her afterward. But I'll answer. For JCMC, we've done 2 special issues. One is about, or we've are in the process of soliciting. We've accepted the abstracts, and now we're waiting for the full papers to come in. One on censor-mediated communication and one on future of work. And I guess I would say that that's probably about the level of generalness versus specificity that I would think to that would make sense. We don't have a formalized process yet. That's something that is kind of in the process. But I would say at this point, an email to me, and I'd be happy to kind of give you some guidance for the kinds of things we would want to see. And I guess I would just kind of emphasize that these would need to be consistent with the kind of vision of the and process of the journal in terms of going out for peer review, and, you know, invitation from abstract to full manuscript is no guarantee. And just we'd have one of our editorial board
members as a reviewer to kind of ensure that it's again consistent with the general practices of the journal. So we're open to it, but we haven't haven't formalized the process yet.
Shall I? Can I go? Yeah, from the annals point of view, is something that we actually would like to start encouraging more special issues, but again, not too specific in terms of maybe one country, but a sort of region. So the special issue that we did in the Global South, for instance, also then had to speak back to theory and concepts and literature in the field. So special issues, but with a remit that is still close to the journal's rationale and aims and sufficient. So there's an upcoming special issue, for instance, on COVID-19, but again, it looks at, it's guest edited by two guest editors, but looking at communication scholarship around COVID-19, the adequacy of theory and concepts up to now, and whether they were adequate for the response to COVID-19. So that sort of general focus with it, what that might be topical, but that it still remains within the sort of broader remit. But special issues is something that we definitely consider. And if you have something in mind for the annals, again, typically email the editor. I would look at it. I would consult the associate editors and maybe the editorial board if it's sufficiently broad. And then we'll get back to you with suggestions for revision and maybe reorientation and take it from there.
Melissa Click, Communication, Culture, and Critique. I would echo everything that's been said so far. I would just point out, I've sort of gotten special issue inquiries in 3 different kinds of states. One is the email like, hey, are you interested in this at all? Should I pursue this? The second would be, I don't really have my table of contents together yet and would like to do a call, but here's my theoretical approach, and here's what I'd like to do with a special issue. And then I've also received them fully fleshed out with the table of contents, authors already, in line. And I would echo what Nicole said. You still have to go through peer review. So it's not, if you come to me with a special issue like that, it's not a done deal. It'll have to go through peer review. But there are a variety of ways in which you could approach with a special issue.
So we are publishing next month a special issue on artificial intelligence, and the next year one about difficult conversation about race and identity. And these were initiated as a result of a conversation between us and between people. We don't have a formal process, but we would want the proposed theme to fit the scope of the journal and its identity as Steve described it earlier. We are currently thinking of the next special issue, which we would want to see focused around 50 years of human communication research. Volume 50 is in our last year, which is already nearing. So if you have ideas about how to celebrate that in a collection that would highlight theoretical progress in the field, in the journal, or a system to go back and reflect and look forward, we'd be happy to hear from you. Any other things? Thanks.
Lance Holbert, Journal of Communication. I would echo a few points of what goes for an individual article, I think also goes for a special issue. So the idea of looking at the vision statement of the journal and that the special issue is going to match that vision is important. So as an example, you had asked used a couple of examples of more methodological, analytical oriented special issues. We have published pieces that are primarily analytical, but with those pieces, they also were offering what we had defined as the field general theory contribution. So as an example, we had a piece on dyadic mediation analyses. And so a big part of what was offered in that piece beyond the analytical advancement is that it provided an organizational structure to existing dyadic relationships and provided an organizational, so it added to the organizational power of the idea of dyadic relationships. So it would be the same thing for that you would outline, all right, here is an analytical approach that we think works across subfields. But beyond that analytical approach, here's how theory is going to be pushed, right? So we had another piece that was accepted that looks at really how analytically to look at reinforcing spirals of media effects, which works across many different subfields, but it actually does, by that analytical approach, it alters the way people need to be thinking about reinforcing spirals. So it provided a theoretical contribution. So all that goes back to, does it match the spirit of the vision of the journal itself? So we had one question on the chat that dealt with how do we deal with preprints and dealing when maybe double-blind peer review is broken. And if somebody, a reviewer, recognizes who the author may be and all of those things. So does anybody wish to
So
comment?
I just want to make sure the other question is also asked. There's a second question that's asking if you could share the acceptance rate for your journal. So maybe you can do both at the same time. Thank you.
I'll go first. Just just address two of them. So preprints are we don't receive many works that are where there's a preprint, and it has been used basically as an experimental kind of task for me. And that's one thing that I will talk with relative to the next editorial team, where it will be important for them to outline what is their specific processes and procedures relative to preprints. And so by and large, we have not had an issue as yet relative to the authors becoming known when those couple cases have occurred to the reviewers. There's been several instances, and actually we've had to do some finagling within Scholar One, where there are times where the author becomes known to the reviewer, and so. By and large, the reviewers are very good about letting us know that indeed I was a potential problem here, or I think I know who this is, or I'm sure I do know who this is. Then they'll ask, like, do you want us to go forward with this or not? Of which usually the discussion is, do you feel comfortable being able to do so, or not? And usually the fallback is to pull them off of that manuscript, at least here at Journal of Communication decision, but that's not been 100%. And so that's done on a kind of a case-by-case basis. And then relative to acceptance rate was the other question that was asked. Journal of Communication right now is like 4.5% is what the acceptance rate is.
So the second question is easy, 8% or so. I have nothing to add to what Lance has said with regards to conflict. It does happen that reviewers write us, and then we factor in who the expertise, who the other reviewers are, and if there's a potential conflict or potential bias, but all in all, this is very rare.
Yeah, my back of the envelope calculations are about 9% acceptance rate at JCNC, and I think for the anonymity of reviewers question, we would to some extent try to work with to get a sense from the reviewer as to whether they felt that was an issue. I think it's safe to say that in many cases, even outside of that process, authors and reviewers are that there's some knowledge about who the author might be. So I think we're all just assuming that reviewers are acting as good citizens in terms of their ability to highlight when they feel like that will bias them in a way that's unfair to the process.
Communication theory's acceptance rate is right around 10%. And yes, I've gotten emails from reviewers, and I typically remove them then from the review process. By the time they let me know that they know this is, I typically prefer to take them off the review of that paper.
The annals of the International Communication Association, our acceptance rate is actually fairly high compared to those, and it's last year was 25%. It has come down actually in recent years, but it is maybe dissimilar from the other journals in the sense that these are typically longer pieces that have been discussed with the editor before submission, and it's already gone to some sort of pre-review often in a way. In terms of the practices of review and confidentiality, anonymity, it's very similar. I should also just add that also associate editors, when they obviously don't see the manuscript blind, but they will then also declare if they know the authors or they have worked with them or too close to them, that they would not reassign the manuscript then to another associate editor. So also on that level, similar to with reviewers, if there's a conflict of interest or any issues around being too close to the submission, then I reassign it to a different associate editor.
So I'll take a little bit of issue with the rate. Oxford gives us the rate of acceptance, and last year we published 3 forums, which are 1,000 to 2,000 words long, and they can have 6 to 10 articles in them. And those typically get accepted because they're curated ahead of time, and so it inflates our rate. So the rate I was given this year was 38%, which is not, in my opinion, accurate. I would guess we're in the 10 to 12% acceptance rate if I had to guess.
Lawrence, could I make one point? So from listening there, this is Steve Wilson, Human Communication Research. From listening to those, they sound pretty low, which on the one hand reflects the rigor of the journals. But so if you get an R&R, things look a lot different. Okay, so if 40 to 50% of work gets desk rejected and a lot of work gets rejected after one round, that's where these numbers are coming from. But if you get an R&R, I mean, we were looking at the data for the last year, over 2/3 of those eventually get published. So it does not guarantee publication. And I think Herman said that this is a dialogue. And so as an author, one of the important things to do as you are writing the letter where you're kind of describing how you've responded to the reviewers is show that you've heard, seriously thought about, whether you make all the changes that are requested, or sometimes you're in the position of reviewer A says do X and reviewer B says don't do X, and you have to figure out what to do, right? But that both reviewers feel like they've been heard. So that letter back is really important. But it is, if you get to the R stage, then things look different. And there's a lot of opportunity for working with the reviewers and the editor for getting that manuscript over the line.
I'd like to ask just to give you the full picture also in terms of desk rejects, communication theory desk rejects about 61% of all submissions, and we do that. It might appear cruel, but it really is saving everybody a lot of time. And I also want to echo, yes, when we get a revise and resubmit, it's no guarantee, but it's a hopeful trajectory, I would say.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the very insightful comments so far. I'm Philip Mendoza from the University of Amsterdam, first-year PhD student, and I recently wrote my first review, and it was very challenging for me to know a bit what makes for a good review, and I tried to also ask the editor whether I could get some review on my review to hear what would make for a good review. And now I'm not asking you what makes for a good review, but maybe how do you advise young early career scholars to learn what makes for a good review. Where should we get this information from? Where should we get these insights? I'm asking my supervisors, of course, but I also understand that maybe different journals have different styles that are the most helpful and the most constructive. Yeah, thank you.
The short answer is constructive and thorough. But we can get into a long discussion of it has many ways it appears. I've had a couple of reviewers going into the open science data and doing analysis that helped and informed the authors. So, but that's very rare. So don't feel obliged. And any suggestion that could help the manuscript improve is really welcome. And I would say that's the short answer.
I can add, totally echo that. And here's maybe one idea I'd add to that is to meet an author on their path, not to now prescribe to them to do the study or the paper that you would have done as a reviewer, right? Meet the author on their path and help them to make the best of that manuscript. That I think authors appreciate, and it becomes doable, and it's a more constructive path forward.
Melissa Click, Communication, Culture, and Critique. I would suggest that Sage has a really lovely guide for new reviewers. And I have been suggesting that ICA create such a thing for reviewers. And I heard just the other day it's in the works. I think that'll be an amazing resource for members. And, because it is hard when you're a young scholar and you're learning how to do it. And I don't think there's any right way. But it does help to read a guide, and if you Google it, you can find some, but I think the Sage one is a pretty good one myself. So I would definitely look for that and stay tuned for an ICA one, hopefully soon.
So we're just about closing up on time. So I wanted to ask if you could all give a round of applause. Thank you for attending and thank you for your questions. Please enjoy the rest of the conference. And if you have any other follow-up questions that weren't answered here today that you would like to ask, certainly reach out to any and all of us, and we'll be happy to fill in the blanks as best we can. All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Do you onze Frans had like yeah, and it's just like a fun and yeah, it's just private.
I'll send you a few dates.
Wat is er hier in de
soccer fans. I could not visit them with
yes. Oh, Herman. Die echt wel toch een klein sensitieve vraag.
And, more information would be helpful. Keyword education.
Dan krijg je dit is voor de buitenstaat, is duidelijk in duidelijk
So I'm not helping with tech for this session because I need to go to a different session.
Okay.
But there is someone on their way to come do that.
And is this computer, does this computer stay?
This is mine, but
Okay,
this
I have my laptop.